Where does all the hatred in the world come from? Even this morning, I was looking at the English news, and the Prime Minister is setting up an inquiry into why the riots took place recently in the United Kingdom. Now, politicians do not have the answers. They think just because they've had certain training, they've got the answers. They haven't got the answers. The answers are spiritual. The root causes of bad feeling or even hatred between family members are seldom properly investigated. If you've ever been tempted to figure out why certain branches within your family just can't get along, you're about to discover that the root was sibling rivalry. Rivalry between brothers and sisters, or brothers and brothers. The Bible records that the earliest family was of Adam and Eve. They had 2 sons, and you had Cain and Abel, and both brought sacrifices to God. Abel's sacrifice was acceptable, Cain's was not. And so jealousy and murderous hatred was the outcome. You can see all this in Genesis chapter 4. Now, several generations later, God chose Abraham to set up a patriarchal bloodline. That's recorded in Matthew 1, verses 1 to 17. The patriarchal bloodline that led to Christ. Now, Christ was his seed. That's explained in Galatians 3 and verse 16. Abraham and Sarah had a really bad time, really frustrating time trying to have descendants. God had promised them a descendants as great as the stars of the heaven, and there was no children coming. So Hagar was suggested by Sarah, go and sleep with her, have children with her. And then Ishmael was born to Hagar. He grew into a teenager, and when baby Isaac, Sarah actually had a baby, Isaac. When baby Isaac arrived, of course, Ishmael mocked the baby. This is in Genesis 21 and verse 9. So sibling rivalry. God promised to make Abraham the father of many nations, not just the father of the Jewish nation, but the father of many nations, both through Isaac and through Ishmael. Both sons were blessed, and both sons were present at his burial, the burial of Abraham. That's in Genesis 25 verse 9, indicating that sibling rivalry was resolved. Isaac grew up and married Rebekah. She had twins, and they themselves were the founders of 2 other nations. These twins, of course, were Jacob and Esau. That's in Genesis 25:23 following. Now, they had rivalry because Jacob tricked Esau out of his father's birthright. And Esau vowed, he said, as soon as the mourning for our father Isaac is over, when he's gone, I'll kill my brother Jacob. That's in Genesis 27:41. But in fact, when they eventually came face to face, although Jacob was fearful, Esau ran out to meet him and kissed him. So there was reconciliation. And that's the usual way in which it works through the scriptures. People were jealous, they reconciled. Now, in Genesis 36, Esau's descendants are listed. They were called the Edomites. And one of his sons, one of the Edomite sons, had a concubine, Timnah, who bore him a son called Amalek. That's in Genesis 36 and verse 12. Now, this grandson of Esau, Amalek, never reconciled himself to Jacob's family. So there was war between Amalek and his descendants, the Amalekites, and the nation of Israel. And this hatred became evident years later when in the exodus from Egypt, the Amalekites attacked the weakened Israeli stranglers at the back of the long caravan of people. They'd just come out from Egypt, they were tired, they had no water for quite some time, and Amalek, this is in Exodus 17, Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. I put the reference in the notes. And at the end of that little section there, you'll see in verse 16, The Lord said, we will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. God was not pleased in the way in which, because of the lack of forgiveness, lack of reconciliation, Amalek was resolved. No, Jacob's tribe, I'm never going to be friends with them, always going to be war. God said, okay, I'll give you war every generation to generation. It was a cowardly attack against Israel. They were tired, they were weary, and they were just liberated out of slavery and on their way to their homeland that God had promised them. Now notice God's decision that he would have war with the Amalekites in every generation. Now how is that possible? Amalek is dead, but the spirit behind it, the spirit of this hatred, has continued to spill out in hatred for God's people ever since that first attack in Rephidim. God knew that in all consequent generations this spirit would be troublesome, and because of the lack of willingness to sincerely be reconciled to Israel, today that same spirit is extremely alive. Now I will trace some more of its manifestations, some more manifestations of that spirit of Amalek, and we'll see how that is affecting many situations later on in Jewish history and also today. Your spiritual eyes will be open to see that the hatred we see and experience today in today's world is spiritual and based on sibling rivalry. So when you think, well, why is this nation why they all hate Israel? Or why does this part of my family? It's sibling rivalry. Those are the key words I want you to grab hold of. Violence between nations, within a family, cannot be resolved by recruiting more police or voting in a different political party. The politicians, very few politicians, are aware of these long-term historical roots. But once you see where the source of the evil is, you won't just say, well, I don't know. Because now you're going to be able to say, well, I know why the violence is there between this people and that people. And it gives you a sense of security. You know what's going on in the world and you understand God's plan of redemption.